Second Chronicles is a narrative history. The author appears to be the prophet Ezra, and it covers the events beginning from King Solomon's reign up to the beginning of the Babylonian captivity. As king of Israel, Solomon sought to finish a project of his father David. David had prepared to build a temple for the Lord, but God did not permit David to fulfill that desire. This lesson records a portion of the dedication ceremony for the finished temple. Israel had assembled. Solomon took his position at the altar of God. Solomon had a pinch moment, a time when you realize the bounty that has been bestowed upon you, and you sort of pinch yourself to make sure you're not dreaming. Inside the court, Solomon's men had built a bronze stage, 7.5 feet square and 4.5 feet high. There the king knelt, stretching out his hands to heaven and praying and blessing the people. His prayers then and our prayers today must come from submissive hearts, ready to accept the direction of God. Israel was surrounded by nations worshiping other gods. Solomon proclaimed that the God of Israel is unlike other gods. Our God is faithful. To Solomon, God was unswerving and unfailing. He kept his covenants. The completion of the temple was an example of how God had, over the years, kept his promise to Israel and to Solomon and his lineage. For modern Christians, Solomon is telling us that God is faithful to his promises. A popular song said, "Had my hand on the dollar bill and the dollar bill blew away." And later it said, "Put my faith in the people and the people let me down." This popular song shows how earthly things waver, but that's a stark contrast to Solomon's proclamation that with God's mouth he promises and with his hands he fulfills over the generations. We see in Solomon's prayer of dedication a heart filled with praise, proclaiming that there is no God like the one that blesses Israel, not in the sky or on earth. His unfailing love is unparalleled. As modern Christians, in our prayer, we must acknowledge the power of God's unconditional love. Christians must not confuse our own success as from our own hands. Our hearts and prayers should reflect the praise of God, not merely our petitions to God. Many of us, like Solomon, contemplate our legacies. With a heart filled with supplication, Solomon begins to petition the Lord to keep his promise, to allow his descendants to rule Israel if they are obedient. Here we see a person with power recognizing that his blessings come from God and that he must ask. We too must not use the Lord as a petition of last resort, but we must recognize that our prayers are our first option. With Israel gathered, Solomon is dedicating this long sought after temple for God. This corporate prayer asks God for intercession and blessings, but Solomon wants to make sure that the people do not focus on the building. His heartfelt prayer acknowledges the omnipresence, the omnipotence of God. Our reverence to God should not be reverence on Sunday while we're on the church grounds. The words that are improper for church are still improper at home, at school, and at work, for we worship an omnipresent, omnipotent God. And Solomon wanted the people to recognize that. Now, Solomon is the king of Israel, but he understands his place in the relationship with God, and he acknowledges that he is a mere servant of God. And he asks God, he pleads with God to listen to his prayer and to show mercy upon him and his people all day and all night. Solomon recognizes, just as we should, that all power belongs to God, and we should recognize that our destiny is in his hands. We see in Solomon's prayer a heart seeking intercession for the people of Israel. The king asks the all-powerful God to forgive the people of Israel for their sins. As I think about this lesson, I remember visiting a church in West Africa. With submissive hearts, the people joyously came to church dressed in their best. At the collection, the people who had assets that could not equal the amount of money I had tucked and hidden away in my shoes, they danced and praised God as if he had poured out a storehouse on them. In their humble supplication, they remembered individual needs, and then they began to pray for those with less, and I wondered who that could be. But as I saw women mending old school clothes, mending uniforms so that those children in the community without uniforms could have them, I recognized the awesome power of God. There is no God like Jehovah. That's the lesson for this week. Have a great week. Bye.